We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Hey, so Brian and I are just meeting for the first time, and mutual friend put us in touch, and he dropped on me about 20 seconds ago about, hey, maybe you got a funny story for my audience. And there's lots of people I could throw under the bus right now, but I'll start with me. Season 1, Longmire, that was a pretty popular show that a lot of people might know me from. Proud of the work we did there. And we're wrapping up. It was a long season. We were out in New Mexico, out in Santa Fe, all kinds of weather and other kind of obstacles that we had to overcome. And it was the last day of shooting season 1. And me and a few of the other cast thought it'd be a good idea to pull a prank on like Lou Diamond Phillips, and I think Rob Taylor, the sheriff, was in this scene and is in a place called the Red Pony, which was his, set, his bar. And a few of the other series regulars, well, we dressed up as background actors. And I was, kind of an alpha dude on the show and whatever. Well, for this prank, I cross-dressed as a woman, full-figured woman, and a few people were in on it, but Lou Diamond Phillips definitely was not in on it. And so I come walking in the scene, and we're filming the show, and I think I'm in heels and an ugly dress and a wig, and he turned around, and I'm going to like give him a beer or something. I'm talking, I'm going to talk to him. He turns around and he goes, his brain just couldn't figure it was like my face, with, in a dress. And anyway, he joked for years afterwards. He's like, dude, I've never gotten that visual out of my head. He's like, you're a very handsome dude, but possibly the ugliest woman that I've ever seen. So
look, my wife and I were talking about him. Oh man, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. We basically live at the beach every chance we get. So we sit at the beach, people watch, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And somehow his name came up, and then we just got to kind of talking about him, and then saying like, damn, like he's one of those guys that everything he's been in to me. Oh, it was Young Guns. We were talking about Young Guns. We made a Young Guns reference.
Yeah.
And we were saying everything that he's been in has been legit. Like just, I don't know, like rock solid. I don't know. We like him. We think he's a cool guy.
He's kind of like Kevin Bacon, that 6 Degrees of Kevin. Lou Diamond Phil. I mean, he's done at least 1,000 movies. I mean, he's worked with everyone. And he is salt of the earth, really nice guy from Texas. And he's got weird, well, not weird, but he's got, his ancestry isn't what you think it would be. He's actually not Latin. So it's cool. People can Google it, figure it out.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask.
Phillips. He's going to be trending. Blame me. But great dude. That was a fun show. We had a good time. Yeah.
Now, when you were on the show, I'm going to put you on the spot. Did y'all have like technical advisors and stuff, or did you just kind of know from some of your background, like this is how cops act, this is how bad guys act? I mean,
that's a good question. We did
put you right on the spot.
Yeah, we did. They weren't around all the time. We kind of had an in-between budget, so we got to do some cool things and got some training in the beginning, and went to the gun range for a day. Like, okay,
that's what you need to know, right?
For a day, like, don't flag anybody, and this is point it downrange. So, and then I was a bit of an athlete when I was younger, so a lot of stuff comes natural, but I did get some good technical training, and I'd done a cop show before called Saving Grace and some military stuff, and we had a few more dollars in the budget and a little more time. I got to work on Batman versus Superman. They actually trained me for weeks. That was probably the best training I ever got. I got to play this Army Ranger called Python, where we come in to rescue, Lois Lane from the terrorists. And for 3 weeks, they paid for me to get, and I grew up riding horses, but I got to ride this sweet kick-ass horse for 3 weeks on their dime, and then also train with a former SEAL Team 6 guy for 3 weeks to just, get everything looking right for the camera.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of shows and movies are trying to kind of dial that in because it does. I mean, it does matter in the sense that even average viewers just watching it, when it looks solid, it looks solid. You know, even to trained eye. But I'll go back to Longmire real quick. A lot of cops have told me, "Hey, you need to check that show out." So
good. Well, I mean, I don't know what you're waiting for, Brian. It was, only canceled about 5 years ago, but no, really.
Listen, look, I just got around to maybe last year watching a show that they call The Office. If you've ever heard of that.
Yeah.
Like I only waited, I don't know, however many years.
Yeah.
No,
welcome to Earth.
Yeah, I'm terrible about TV shows and movies. So it's like certain parts of my life, I can tell you what movie it was, when it came out, the soundtrack, all that. And then other times I just stay busy and just didn't watch a lot of TV, man. But that's one of those shows that even some neighbors down the street, they love it. And they're not like into like cop shows. They're not into stuff like that, but they're just like, man, it's just really well written, great acting. And I'm not just blowing smoke. That's what they tell me. So I'm like,
yeah, cool. Right. No, tell them thank you. Tell them thank you. You're under review, Brian, but they have good taste. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was like a pre-Yellowstone, came out right before Yellowstone, and then Yellowstone became what it did, and they had obviously more money, and Kevin Costner helps, and then Taylor Sheridan's a genius. I'm a fan of a ton of his shows, and strangely, we never crossed paths as actors. We know a lot of the same people, because before he was making his own stuff, he was just a jobbing actor. Like the rest of us. So,
well, and that's one of those things too that like his name comes up quite a bit. I haven't seen Yellowstone either, so I mean it sucks sometimes. When like we're sitting around neighborhood like fires and stuff. We live in a great neighborhood, by the way. Like legit, they do they call them porcellos. It started out of COVID, so there's a lot of musicians in the city we're in, and COVID lockdowns, musicians were wanting to play, and one of the neighborhood guys started walking down the street playing a guitar, and people just started walking out of their homes and following him. Yeah. Wow. And so it's a tradition that's been going on now for several years, but and they're starting to back up. It's kind of seasonal. So they'll you pick like 3 houses in the neighborhood, and the local musicians will be like, yeah, we're going to hit this house at this time. Then we're going to walk down to this house and we'll play there, and then we'll walk down. And people are having like little backyard fires and stuff. It's crazy. And they do a lot of filming here too, which I fully get it,
Yeah.
But when I'm sitting around talking to people and they're like, oh my gosh, have you seen Yellowstone? I'm like, no. They'll mention so like with The Office, it was finally like, my wife's like, you got to watch The Office. And now I think we've watched it like twice, like just binge watched it. So.
Office is good. I had a friend on Parks and Rec, and I love watching Pratt and that, and now, I mean, whatever. He's obviously A-lister, but I feel like he's doing my kind of roles. But the fact that he's got that range that he can do both, I mean, I've done a little bit of comedy, but I got to do a table read with him one time, and he was just so like fast and dry, and when you're doing comedy, you just got to commit, and he was all in.
Now, look, I've seen Parks and Rec. That was the last one with this.
Okay,
I got up to speed on.
Well, look at you.
Oh man, it's funny because we started watching it, and my wife's like, "Hey, it's similar to The Office in that sense, but you're gonna like it. Just give it some time with the characters and stuff." And it is great, and it's funny to watch him playing that part. Because like when I first heard about him was probably Guardians of the Galaxy. And then like right after that, was all Jack Carr stuff like Terminal List and he was involved in stuff like that. And that's kind of how I associated him. So then to go and see him in Parks and Rec, I'm like, but the whole cast of that show and the writing is obviously, that is incredible, dude.
Yeah.
Hey, look, one of the things that I will not mention at all is the fact that you played football for Duke University.
Well, you just mentioned it. So
no, we're not gonna talk.
We're not even gonna talk about it. We're just gonna not talk about it.
Look, what did I
Blue
tell you in
Devil.
the email? I was like, hey, the good news is you played football for Duke and you got a psychology degree. The bad
Yes.
news is I've got a psychology degree and it's from NC State.
Yeah. No, I thought that was very self-deprecating of you. And yeah,
Yes.
man, I love going to school there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really fun to have all three so close together.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we hate the Tar Heels.
Together, yeah.
And so, yeah, state, but I mean, I used to like going down the road to Raleigh because,
Mm-hmm.
no offense, Duke's a smaller school, and but the girls over in Raleigh they were pretty friendly. We had a good time when we would go to
Uh-huh.
Raleigh. We go to Chapel Hill. We used to get in a fight down there, and then we go like clubbing in Raleigh. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's funny after being in LA, but I was living in Durham at the time, so Raleigh was a big deal.
Yeah,
And I
I
love
will
it.
say that. Like
Yeah.
Duke, UNC, I mean the degrees probably weigh a little more in the collegiate
No,
world, but
they're all interchangeable,
yeah, I don't put a whole lot of weight on a degree. I liked it. I did like studying psychology,
Mhm.
um, which a lot of people made fun of me, even in the police academy when they found out because I
Mhm.
had been in the army before and I already knew how to play the game. So when I went to the academy, I stayed quiet, but the
Yeah.
staff, they check your backgrounds and they started dogging me out about having a psychology degree. And then my nickname became Dr. Phil and just, I was like, man,
That's
because I was
good.
like, once I
That's
got
a
on the street, man, it was like being known for talking to people, like always being nice and kind until if you had to do use force, you did use force, and then you just tell them
Yeah.
afterwards, like, man, this is where you screwed up. They're like, yeah, you're right.
You're just
But
you're getting information,
yeah,
and I think the baddest dudes are the ones who aren't flexing.
yeah,
You just kind of feel them. You see them and you feel them, but they're not doing anything to get noticed. And so, to talk about other stuff that is a little more current. Shooting something called Homestead. I'm going to Utah actually
mhm,
tomorrow to shoot this thing in the snow before it melts. I'm so excited to get back,
uh-huh,
to finish the first season, and then this kind of sets up season two. But I get to play this guy Jeff Kirkham, who's a real life retired Green Beret, very decorated operator, and so I got to meet him right before we started filming. That it started as a feature, plus series, and right before we started shooting, and I was like, this dude is really quiet.
mhm,
He's very present, and he's kind of scary,
yeah,
And so
yeah,
we just kind of sat and talked, and we had coffee and felt each other out for about an hour and a half. And basically, he was kind enough to meet with me because I had just a few pressing questions that I wanted to hopefully get answered. Because I want, I take all my roles seriously, but this one, but a little more. Yeah, I wanted to
mhm,
get this one right. And one of the questions was, what is it like, coming home and
mhm,
reintegrating? And yeah, I am like you said, a family man. That means everything to me.
mhm,
Um, but when you've got a job to do, and then you got to kind of like, yeah, you're not in a war zone anymore, but it's as like it stays with you.
mhm.
And so I wanted that in my character Jeff, throughout the film, and I give him credit for helping me get there.
Yeah, I think that there are like stereotypes in every field, and I can remember growing up and meeting some of my mom's friends who had been in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And like one guy in particular was just a loudmouth,
Mm-hmm.
always bumping his gums about what he did, how he flew this helicopter, how he got shot down.
Yes,
But
sir.
I noticed at a young age,
Yeah.
that's probably why I, went into discipline psychology. I love to watch people, even at that age.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching my mom's friends who I knew had been like one guy was a medic
Mm-hmm.
and he never talked about it. My mom said that. She's like, "Hey, don't ever mention it. Don't ask him about it. Don't bring it up." And I watched all these guys, their reactions, because my mom would hang out in this bar and we'd all skate up there and hang out and see everybody. And then, but old buddy started bumping his gums, and then I realized like, maybe he's fake, maybe he's lying.
Mm.
And then I don't know, a couple years later, I found out the truth, and he was lying about everything. He was a hustle man. But there's something about that I think really good people who are really, really professional at what they do have a calmness in the sense that they're secure in what they're doing. And then they also are secure in talking about it, because then they can answer those questions.
Yep.
And then there are those who have not done that, or are not as good. And even in their peer groups, they know they're not as good. And so then they have to boost up, and then they end up giving everybody a bad name, man.
Yeah. And to kind of finish it up, to this guy Jeff has come full circle, and it doesn't sound sexy, but he got a master's in nursing, and now he runs these workshops, helping vets and just citizens, civilians with PTSD or anxiety or just life, man. You suffer trauma and loss in life, and sometimes you need help, and so now he's dedicated his life to helping people. And I was like, whoa, dude, that's a high bar that you're setting. So the cool thing is, I think the character Jeff will eventually get there, but right now he's in the stories, and he's going to be for a while controversial, because I'm justified in what I'm doing, but we're now within the story, we're in a war zone. So I'm at, we talk about heart of war, heart of peace. Real life Jeff now is in heart of peace. He has that luxury, whereas Homestead Jeff is heart of war. And to me, that's the real strength. Whatever, just stream of thought here, but I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and I listen to his podcast, read some books, and another psychology guy, right? Here we go.
Best, man.
He's Canadian, but we'll forgive him for that part.
He probably likes Brian Adams.
Really smart guy, and he knows his Bible. Oh my God. Yeah. So if you ever got some time to kill, he does a series on that. Definitely worth a listen. And he talks about the strongest men, I don't remember the exact quote, but are the ones who are capable of severe violence and choose not to use it.
That's and not to cut you off, but like I hated how, and it seems like it's balanced out a little bit, but a couple of years ago, how there were like social media reels and comments about him being an extremist and a chauvinist and all this stuff. And I'm going, well, hang on now. Like everything that I've heard this guy say so far, I'm like, I'm like,
no, we did. We went through that cancel culture moment, and I was living out in LA at the time, and thank God.
I'm so sorry, dude.
I know. I mean, I got love for LA, and I'm not gonna.
I'm messing with you.
But no, you're good. They brought it on themselves. They keep putting what's his face back in the governor's mansion. So anyway, and Joe Rogan, I'm a fan of Joe Rogan too, because it's just refreshing to listen to a podcast like yours, like Rogan, Jordan Peterson, where people are just candid, and you don't have to agree, but they're speaking their truth, and I 100% respect that, and that's the the society and the country that I want to live in, that I want to raise my kids in that culture. I don't want to raise them in cancel culture. Like, oh, you got to bite your tongue, you're going to upset people. No, you be respectful, be honest, be true to yourself. And if you need help, he's listening.
Yeah. That, and that's the thing, when you talked about being respectful, that was how I was raised, to be tactful. If you disagree with someone, that's fine. I mean, if they've got logic on their side, or they've got proof, hear them out. And then if you still go, you're right, but I still don't want to agree with it, that's cool too. You don't have to like fight over it. Like the way I grew up, if you're fighting, it's got to be pretty serious. We're not, and when we're going to fight, we're not going to sit around and talk for 10 minutes and like two roosters or something. So I'm glad we've moved out of that. And I think it's cool that almost like when I was a kid, and you may or may not, do you remember like Wolfman Jack, or hearing about the stories about pirate radio coming out of Tijuana? Like
No.
it would have been prior to us being kids.
Tell me.
You're about 20 years older than me, I think, man. I'm just messing with you,
Yeah.
dude. We're pretty close in age, man. We're very close.
Funny, I don't look that much older, but you know.
No. I'm messing with you. Like, cause you and I could care less about age. It's funny. There's certain people, man, they get all testy about it. I'm like, man, enjoy life. But
yeah.
My dad went to high school out in San Diego in the mid 60s. So he that was the first time I'd heard about Wolfman Jack, like when I was a little kid. And then you'd see him sometimes on, I think, like American Bandstand or something. But the dude he ran a pirate radio station, and the word was it was being broadcast out of Tijuana. Therefore, like there was no censors. He could talk and say whatever he wanted to.
Oh, wow.
And he would talk about the submarine races. And so my dad's like, yeah, I would take my date out on these cliffs, and you tune in the radio, and Wolfman Jack helps you out because he's like narrating these submarine races. He's like, and it was just an excuse for us to get a date out, out near the coast, to have a romantic night or whatever.
Wow.
But the whole idea of like pirate radio, or just the idea that you can use technology and actually have free speech, which back then I never would have thought as an adult how bad it has gotten. And it was scary for a little while. I feel like we're now kind of shifting out of a very like crazy time in history that will look crazy to a younger generation. I think
it's really toxic out there, and I wonder, and I'm not sure how old your kids are, but mine are just turned 9, and our oldest about to turn 11. It's going to be a different world. We'll be long gone, and the kids will, be living in this other world. But, I feel like back in the, like Cold War days, like there were certain things that could always bring our country together. 9/11 was tragic, but it brought our country together and made us stronger. I haven't felt that, that connected as a nation since. Even in LA, everybody, came together 9/11, post 9/11. And God, I don't know what it's going to take to get back to that place. I fear what it would actually take, but I mean, you like we were just talking about a couple minutes ago, we could almost agree to disagree back then, Democrat, Republican, US, foreigner, didn't matter. And now it's just so ugly. It's character assassination. You're canceled. We can't talk. And then disinformation. I mean, it's I think the kind of propaganda machine is starting to break down, because I think the average citizen has now heard enough and seen enough to go, oh man, that's crazy that for years the news was making millions off of us fighting and arguing and rioting, and you're like, news has kind of always been that way. It just, they had to up the game when more and more channels came out and more networks, and it's like, if what is it, the old saying, if it bleeds it leads. I used to call them vultures when I would be on crime scenes, and they were I will say the news was always respectful. They knew, don't come up and put a camera in our face, don't put a microphone in our face. We've got like a public affairs person for that. But I hated the way that like they were vultures, like they were waiting for some kind of incident to happen. And then when it did, I did see a shift where some local reporters had started exaggerating things that they knew were not true. And they got reprimanded and they disappeared. They got fired, whatever. Right.
But that was really like, I'm in the moment and doing the things that, the homicide investigations and stuff. But I'm just like, man, like I hope for society that we come out of this and people are a little more understanding of other people and going, you know what? I'm not going to believe a channel or a news outlet that makes millions of dollars off of drama and fake, fake information, misinformation. I'm going to actually just trust that my next door neighbor is just as nice and as respectful to me as I am to them. You know, I don't know. Just coming out of that, I was like, man, I just really want people to understand, one, like how great America is in that sense. And if it was not such a great country, people wouldn't be, you know, fighting so hard to get here, legally or illegally. That's the other conversation. Like, being in the world that I was in for so long, I met people that were in the country illegally and scared to death that they were going to get deported, and working 2 jobs and doing everything they could to raise their kids, but their kids were joining gangs, and it was like they were going out and committing violence. And it's like, your parents put their lives on the line, you know, to come into America, albeit they got here illegally, but you now are ruining everything for them, you know, yourself, your neighborhood. So I did used to have a lot of serious talks with guys like that about the decisions they're making and throwing it all away, and then letting them know, when you're 25 years old and you're potentially in prison the rest of your life, it may not be here in America, brother. You know, it may be in a country that you were 5 years old when you left, but you've now committed such violence against your own neighborhood, you know, and against people that your parents had cookouts with. You know, it's it's a very important thing, I think, and I'm getting on a soapbox, but for law enforcement to have those conversations with gang members, you know, with whatever, anybody in whatever criminal organization. Like, sometimes the younger they are, the less they're thinking long term. Frontal lobe, you know, we know that. But
Absolutely.
But that idea of understanding, I say it, and some people correct me when I say I still think America is the greatest country and the greatest idea of what a country can be in the world. And people would try to correct me. And usually some people, and they're respectful, but some people that try to correct me on that have never lived anywhere else or know a whole lot about people who are coming here, you know, from another country, and they have the horror stories. And I don't know, man. I love freedom. That's all I can say.
Me too. And I think that's great. And back when I was studying psychology and I would go to, you know, juvie centers and things like that, and, you know, I was a college football player. So, you know, I had somewhat of a platform to just try to be a good example, role model. My childhood actually wasn't ideal, but I was fortunate enough to kind of channel my frustration, anger into football and sports. And, you know, so it actually became a weapon for me, you know, a tool to help me, you know, get better, to give me opportunities that I wouldn't have had. You know, I wasn't really smart enough. Duke wasn't recruiting me for my SAT score, you know, and
they were like, we need a good line.
You were like, Coach, it's good enough, right? Like, you know. But you know, and I did want to make a difference. I wanted to give back, and I didn't really have a father figure growing up. And I, you know, watched Clint Eastwood movies. That's, you know, ultimately probably why I became an actor. I want to be like that guy. And then psychology, you know, drew me into, because I was a bit of a detective. Like, I wanted to solve things, and you know, just a dude who wants stuff to make sense. You know, why did my parents, you know, break up? Why does this make me feel this way? And so, I got some tools to help navigate those waters, and eventually get to a place of peace. Some days are better than others. And now I try to pass it on to my kids or any friends or family who come to me. And, you know, we're all about 50, and turn 50 was great for me. And now I have some actual experience to draw off of, and I think give quality advice. This is a funny thing that's happening on film sets the last couple of years. Is like, all of a sudden I'm looking around, and there's guys like Neil McDonough who are, you know, a little senior to me, and have obviously done more, John Phillips, guys like that. But now all of a sudden it's like, man, I'm one of the older guys now. You know, I'm 25 years in, and I get, you know,
it's a good feeling, man.
It is a good feeling, a sense of accomplishment. And for, I know you're the same way, Brian, but like someone who's very driven and demands a lot of themselves, I can now see enough. I don't look in the past much, but when I do look back, it's like, wow, you've done a lot. Roger that. Keep going. You know, I'm David Goggins guy. Like, you know, Roger that. You know, what's next?
Yeah.
Keep going, you know?
Yeah. So when you mentioned like growing up, and this is where a lot of people are like, man, you should ask a whole lot of questions. I don't ever want to intrude, but when you talk about like your childhood, I'll tell funny stories sometimes, and then I'll also stop and go, man, like it's funny now as an adult, but boy, that was some dangerous stuff, you know. And you mentioned parents splitting up. The same thing. My parents split when I was 6. But like, what were some of those things that like you were going through? Was it just kind of different home than maybe everybody else was living in, or what?
Yeah, I mean, it was younger for me when it happened. They were divorced by the time I was 2, so I have no recollection of ever living with my dad. When we got older, my brother and I, he stayed in suburbs of Chicago. We moved down to South Florida. My mom's mom had retired down there, so I grew up in Naples. And then, I have an older brother, 2.5 years older. But once we were starting to become teenagers and whatnot, and mom was at work, and we had time between school and practice, and drugs became a thing, and like crack cocaine. There's a huge like that happened right around when I was 14. My brother was 16. He had a car, only cost like $10 to go get, we all had $10. We didn't have 100, but we had 10. And me, idolizing my brother and his friends. Like I was the 14-year-old jumping in the car with the 16-year-olds, going to smoke crack cocaine. And mom's like, okay, this is, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And he got sent off to boarding school first. And then the following year I got sent off. And as hard as it, I'm sure was for her to send her boys away from home, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So then I went to a prep school up in Jacksonville, Florida, and my roommate was Chipper Jones for any baseball fans out there. And he was a pretty motivated, kid. We were, 14, 15 at the time. And he was very much on the straight and narrow and focused on obviously baseball. And he was a great influence on me. And I had a chance to, choose. I can start a new life, right here, right now at this boarding school, and get on the right path, or I can repeat what I just did down in Naples. And I got on the right path, and was just kind of, we won, a bunch of state championships in football and baseball, and was just good enough to get a. I did look at Chapel Hill, Virginia, and Duke were my top 3, but Duke was the first one to offer. So I felt like I had to, but my high school girlfriend was at Chapel Hill. I would have gone there, and Virginia was number 1 in the nation my senior year in high school. And had they offered, I probably would have gone there. But again, big man's got a plan, and it happened the way it was supposed to, and here we are.
Yeah. I do think it's important. Like I said, for someone who loves talking to people, man, I do shy away sometimes because I have asked people questions before, not on the show, but like just in public. And people, it brings up things that they haven't thought of in a long time, and so I never want to step on, I don't know, like someone's toes or like upset them or anything, but something like that, what you were just talking about, people get this idea, I think, that like actors or actresses or whatever, that they're all coming from these backgrounds that life is just so easy and wonderful. And, that they happen to just live in LA or New York, and they get, discovered whatever, working in a restaurant. I don't know. It's people get, I think, a very skewed view of people who are successful in any kind of arts or entertainment or writing, that their upbringing did not create that. You know what I mean? Like that drive or that motivation. Same thing when you're talking about being 14 and hanging out with older kids. I was the same way. And in the same city that I had done search warrants in a certain hotel, and I don't know, stopped hundreds of gang members, all this stuff. Like, it was just a wild area. When I was a kid, we would go there, and my older cousins or my brother, somebody would rent a hotel room. And I had a cousins, smoking crack and buying it. And he was eventually into selling coke, and I say the poor guy because when it's a relative, it hits hard. And he struggled most of his life with cocaine, alcohol. He was just a wild guy. He and his brother both. His brother died in his early 20s, maybe. And basically when he died, it was, hey, what, in the family, because I was younger, and the family was like, hey, what happened? And my mom's like, he had a heart attack, son, is what they think happened. I was like, oh, okay. But also, we know through cocaine use and stuff like that, it just, but when you're facing something like that at an age when puberty's going on, and man, I will say, like, you have like you can have anger issues. You can have, I don't know if you got in a lot of fights or not. I mean, we were fighting constantly, and and it's like, I at least can think back now as an adult and go, man, at least I never started them. Well, most of them I didn't. If somebody's getting bullied or picked on, then I would. But most of the fights that I got in serious ones, I never started. And hell, half the time we'd have to piece it together and go, hey, man, what happened? Like, all of a sudden people are swinging and, throwing punches. But going through all of that, and obviously, you were able to get a football scholarship, but you had mentioned talking to some kids, or at least some teenagers, about stuff like that. Was that in the Durham area? Was that what you said? Or
yeah, it was. And, it was part of, I did a couple independent studies where I would go there and just spend time with the juveniles and talk to them, tried to mentor them. But in the meantime, I was also like putting the pieces of puzzles, together in my own mind and trying to make sense of how they got here, and of course, when you have an easier path, like you can appreciate that, like, oh, my life's not so bad, or my childhood wasn't so tough. It's not as hard as this guy, and it's a real blessing that, I'm sitting here playing football at Duke University, not, behind bars, because that could have happened. I was real fortunate that crime wasn't a big thing, in my, adolescence or teen years or whatever. Like, there wasn't a lot of like crime. There were drugs. And then playing college football, we always got drug tested. So, I was going to keg parties, but I wasn't doing, hard narcotics.
Around that time, or maybe, no, it's actually several years later. I think like in the early 2000s, there was a documentary that came out called Welcome to Durham. And it was all about the gang problems in Durham.
Wow.
And so, of course, it kind of like one of those bootleg videos that took off. And so everybody's like, man, Durham this, Durham that. And I'd always be like, plenty other cities in North Carolina and along the East Coast that sadly are having the same gang issues. But but that one stuck with Durham, and for years, it would be that. I ended up going to a meeting in Durham, traveling over there. A buddy of mine, he's now a police chief, but he's like, hey, can you fill in for me, man, at this meeting? They want to talk about some gang stuff. I was like, yeah, man, I got you. Cause I would travel around a lot, whatever assignment I was on, I was always working gang stuff, whether it was aggravated assaults, homicide, FBI task force. So I was like, yeah, dude, I'll go. And since you've been in Durham, like Durham is an interesting city to me because it's like two polar opposite worlds. There's almost like people that are really like, I don't want to say like hipsters, but like this idea of revitalizing the city. And then you've got areas that, I mean, they are rough, and you do have gangs, and they're all interconnected and stuff, Bloods, Crips, a lot of Sereno cliques and stuff out there, that flow back all the way to California. So anyway, they did it. They had a huge gang problem, much like the city I was traveling from. So anyway, I go in there, and I think I'm meeting with like the gang unit and a couple of officers and stuff. And I go in and sit down, and it's the mayor, the newly elected sheriff, city council, their police chief, and then like the gang unit sergeants over there. I'm like, oh, well, like when it comes to gangs, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and there's nothing political. Like, I will answer your questions directly. And then I realized that was the battle. There was like some some behind the scenes politics going on. And a lot of it was about, even back then, this was probably, I don't know, 8 years ago, something, maybe less, but about deportation. And I think at that time, Durham sheriff had stopped assisting ICE under 187G, I think is what it was, or 287G. Sorry. I think it's like called 287G, but it's basically if someone's detained or, arrested, and then there's like a liaison that can run their name and get it over to ICE. And then ICE can say, yes, that person has been deported twice already out of America, so it was like sharing information.
Yeah.
Either way, during that meeting, it quickly became that I realized there was two types of people in that room. One that wanted crime to, and when I say crime, I'm talking about violent crime, like the murders, the shootings,
Sure,
to go down. And then there was a side that was kind of like more, we care about this platform that we're on. And I couldn't wrap my brain around it at the time. And I explained it to them like, I've utilized this technique numerous times. Like I have ICE agent on speed dial, and he makes a lot of my violent problems go away. And you know who thanks me the most whenever the shooter or the suspect, because if we could charge them for shooting, we would. A lot of times you can't charge them, and they're terrorizing the neighborhood. And some of my best sources were here illegally. And you go back and you talk to the neighborhood, and you're like, hey, the word is, and they're like, yeah, he disappeared, and we're glad. Thank you. Wow. And guess what? Then they tell you when the next person gets in the neighborhood or the next gang starts to recruit, and trying to recruit their kids or grandkids, it's like, all right, get back on the phone and go, hey, like, this is the dude. He's tatted up, but because of my background, I can explain to you what gang it is, that he is validated. This is why. This is how you can articulate it. And then they come in at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and scoop up some really violent guys and send them, to either Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras. I mean, it has spread, the whole gang culture has spread so much. But the people who were being victimized the most were here illegally. So it's weird when people would try to play the political game or even pull like a race card on me and, man, you're just a Southern white cop. I'm like, man, you don't even know. Like, you don't understand like what the big picture is. And we're kind of seeing it now, I think in other cities, people are starting to kind of understand that it's always about prioritization of violent offenders. Yeah. And that what was once something in a movie, back in the 80s, like when Colors first came out, California was known for having gangs, nowhere else really, or maybe New York, Chicago, but damn, when we were young. But you had mentioned Florida, like one of the first areas I remember hearing about outside of my area was down in Florida, and it was Jacksonville.
Yeah. Well, so they're I-95, Durham's, I-40. And so I've made, good friends with a lot of local law enforcement here. A lot of the, various sheriff departments, and Hurricane Helene obviously happened. Went up there, Yancey County, here in Henderson County. I'm on a board called Henderson County Heroes that benefits local first responders. And there were a lot of requests, post hurricane, but I love spending time with these guys. I'm actually developing a show that would take place here in the Appalachian Mountains, and they're like, man, we got stories for you, and it's eye-opening to talk to them. And they're not naming names or anything, but the amount of drugs that are traversing the 40 on a daily basis, and motorcycle gangs and whatever. And this is all good fodder for me to put it in a fictional story, but based in some truth. And man, when you were talking just now, I had deja vu, like the beginning of the end for me in LA. Like, okay, I'm not thinking like most of my neighbors. I mean, there are some people here, some good people, but the whole defund the police. And I'm like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever even heard of. But like, whatever, it ran its course. I think most people now see that was that was a bad idea. And the way that I was reminded about it, so I'm reading advanced scripts of Homestead, right? So it's post-apocalypse, and who's taken over the world? Gangs, militias, the cartels coming north of the border, because there's no law enforcement, right? There's no military. It's the apocalypse. So the fact that people were calling for this by
Yeah.
choice is just so dumb. And then the final straw was COVID. Like that was
Yeah.
what
And
was? Tell me what that was, Brian. Tell me.
what's that? COVID?
Yeah,
I know exactly. Hey, you know what it was, dude.
Tell me.
Since you and I have got that piece of paper, that psychology degree,
Yeah,
man, I saw it flip. Right, like when it first happened, I'm like, okay, I don't have the luxury of not going to work, at that time. Like, hey, we got to go to work.
Right, we got kids.
Yeah, and man, I think I was either intel sergeant at the time or a homicide sergeant. Either way, nobody's not going to work, And it took a few months, and then realizing, oh, I see how this is. The news makes a lot of money off of hyping it up. People were obviously, there was some type of an infection, and it was tough. And I know 2 people who passed away. Now they also had, comorbidity. They were overweight. They were already had health issues they were battling. Yeah. So everything that started to make sense to me was, I need more sunlight. I need to get, more focused about exercise, because I've always thought it was good, but now, it could be a lifesaver. And then unplugging completely.
Yeah.
And it felt like that, like, man, I'm done with the news.
Yeah.
I would go to my department, and even my department was split. It was like, hey, you need to be wearing a mask when you're out there. Like, wait a minute. We need to be wearing a mask at a crime scene where no one else is around us. And sadly, there's the person is dead. And my team, we're together 24/7, basically. So if he's got COVID, I get it.
Totally.
But then I started seeing it. It was the mask. And I'm like, man, I feel like this is the symbol when you look around and go, this is the division.
Yep.
You either wear the mask or you don't. And if you don't wear the mask, that means you fall in line with this political ideology, this belief.
Yeah.
If you do, and that was the scary thing. And I thought, here it is. Here's the litmus test for some really evildoers, so to speak.
Yeah.
To figure out who's on what team.
Totally. And that's where cancel culture came from. That's where it started. And so, I'm out there in LA, and there's no, my kids were young at the time. They were like 3 and 5. And so the twins, fortunately, were able to still go to preschool, because it was private, and it was an essential business, so the parents could still work. Although entertainment business was completely shut down. Our oldest did first grade online, which was a total disaster. And, LAUSD, all the teachers didn't want, it was a tough year. So we hung in there for a year, and, looking to the government to help us, save us, give us good news, figure it out. It's what the tax dollars are for, right? Because we pay a lot of taxes out there. And after, and what do? They closed the beaches. They closed the hiking trails. They told you not to, walk the streets if you didn't have to. Like we had a dog. All the things. And then finally, when they started the conversation about going back to school, they're like, yeah, your kids aren't going to be able to go back to school unless they're vaccinated. Now I'd already done the job, because I needed to work. Right. I started going to Canada for work. And at that point, I chose my kids and my family over my career. I was like, I'm not doing this, and blah, blah, blah. And already people had started to leave. And I was like, if I need to do something else, I will. And haven't looked back. Missed it.
I was not eligible. Listeners have heard me tell this, and some people go, we get tired of hearing. I'm like, I don't care. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say it until I'm 80 years old. You'll still hear me say it. Remember, I'm like, and I'll still be in shape.
Yeah.
I'll be like, hey, remember that time when we felt like we were in a Twilight Zone episode? But our city had made a policy that they couldn't fire you for not getting it, but you couldn't be promoted or even laterally transferred. So like someone could be a patrol officer and put in for the gang unit, which is not a promotion. It's just a lateral transfer. And the policy stated clearly you could not do that.
Wow.
Yeah, because this is the devious thing, I think.
Yeah.
They wanted everyone to cave in. Sadly, I say sadly, officers are conformists at heart. Even though I grew up the way I did and I question everything, I still believe at the end of the day, there's got to be order, and I don't ever want anyone to get hurt or, a violent crime to occur or whatever. So I fully believe in what I do. But damn, my entire career, I questioned everything. And so when this policy came out, I was already nervous anyway about a speedy vaccine that they had cut all the red tape and got out there. And I just, my gut was like, I don't know. I'm really nervous about this. And so I didn't say anything. And the department kept saying, hey, these are the dates and times. Make sure you go get your vaccine. Make sure your people get your vaccine. I was just stay quiet. And I was like, they will eventually have to track me down, and I'll play stupid because I am very good at playing stupid.
Yeah.
Just be like, oh, I must have forgot. Yeah. Okay. Until eventually I just tell them, I'm not getting it. So if you need to fire me, whatever. But they did that policy. And so when that policy was written in, I was a lieutenant at the time, and captain would have been my next rank.
Right.
And so I couldn't even, I was no longer eligible for captain. But if my captain at the time, whatever, did the same thing I did and didn't get vaccinated, he's still doing the job. You know what I mean? So I'm like, how does this work? If this guy can still do the job as captain.
Exactly.
And then I was like, oh, you all have been flipped. This is all becoming too.
Yeah. You were like, you're the Aaron Rodgers of law enforcement. It's basically, that's basically what you were. Like, I forget the term that he used. It wasn't vaccinated, inoculated, or And then and then he got away with it for a couple more weeks, and then finally. Okay.
This was the crazy thing, was that I stay quiet. I've always been that way. Like, people live their life and they do whatever they want to do. But as long as you don't tell me I got to do it, like I will hang out with someone who whatever, but as long as they don't tell me what I got to do.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And so when I stay quiet about it, yeah.
You love our freedom.
I stayed quiet about it. And then after a while, the conversation was starting to come out. And then I started finding out the same people that were not getting in line the way I wasn't were my buddies that I came up through all these assignments with. We worked drug units together, gang unit, aggravated assault, homicides. And these are my core group of guys. Like, man, like, we've done really good work, and I've always thought they were the best in the field. And like, now it's like, hey, are y'all seeing what I'm seeing? Like, yeah, dude, like, this is like, we're in a weird, like I said, it felt like Twilight Zone. I mean, to the point where we would go to training and people weren't wearing masks. And then like a captain will walk in and be like, you will wear the mask, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, this is the craziest, dumbest thing that I have ever seen. And they wanted to die on that hill. But the people who were doing that were also the weaker leaders who have been promoted. So then, of course, the theory starts out with like, we got to wear the mask to get promoted. I was like, look, man, that ain't got nothing to do with crime fighting.
I'm thinking of the fire chief out in LA, when they, had the fires early this year, and what a disaster. But I was like, wow, I just don't think she's the right person for that job, but that's who it was at that time,
Yeah. So that's the thing too, that, there are a lot of people that will retire out of these fields, law enforcement, first responders. And then a lot of times they'll write a book or they'll do whatever, a lecture circuit, and talk about leadership and that sort of thing. And like, some of the best leaders I had were storytellers but were proficient at what they were doing. And that was the thing that I always looked at, was like, one of the best patrol sergeants I had, we would play a game where we would create a situation at like 3:00 in the morning and send him a car-to-car message. Cause at that time, we had these computers and stuff in our car. We would be like, dude, okay, let's come up. Cause we were in our area was mostly condensed, and it was gangs and drugs and a lot of violence, and just like drug sales, open air prostitution, like stuff like that. But we were like, man, this dude knows everything. Hey, I wonder if you can write a parking ticket to an 18-wheeler trailer that's like part, you know, like we're just creating these stupid little scenarios, and we'd send him a message.
Yeah.
And if he wouldn't like immediately send it back and be like, yeah, refer to GS, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
We're like, he's the greatest. But the best
Yeah.
part about it,
Yeah.
that dude would kick a door in when we needed to. We would call him up. Hey, Sarge, we got a guy with an active warrant. We can see somebody peeking out of the blinds.
Yeah.
They've turned the lights out. Nobody wants to answer the door. And he'll just be like, is that a valid arrest warrant? We're like, yeah, it just came out. Okay, what's the offense? You know, whatever. He's wanted in a shooting or whatever fight. Okay. And that's his legal address. That's what it says on the arrest warrant. That was his last known address, whatever. You know, his driver's license is like, he'd always clap his hands by, all right, boys, let me get there and we'll kick that door in. And we would. And that was, I mean, we, at one point, we would do these secondary projects where they gave us complete freedom as patrol officers. And they would say, hey, if you want to work informants, if you want to do, you know, surveillance projects on corner stores, you know, whatever you want to do, make arrests, go after bad guys with guns. And this sergeant, like, we would do it. We'd come in on these days that were secondary. And we snuck up to a drugs and vice unit and stole their door ram, you know, the city, the key to the city that would knock the doors in. Yeah. And stole the ram and borrowed a utility van from city maintenance and went and did a search warrant and went and knocked the door in just like, I mean, it was pure chaos. Now, I'm not saying it's the best way to do things, but for a young officer, I believed, hey, that house, and back then it was like a crack house. It's like that house has been like the problem in this neighborhood forever. And now we're given the ability to go do a search warrant. And we were told, hey, the SWAT team, we had 3 SWAT teams at the time that were full. That's what they did, like full assignment. Yep. And we didn't have access to one of the teams. They were doing whatever. And he's like, oh, well, hey, when I was a patrol officer, we kicked doors in. So he's like, we don't have time to wait around. So, all right, cool. So that kind of gave me that idea of, if I'm a leader, if I know exactly what to do and when to do it, and I'm, you know, following obviously the law first and then policy second, it's like, well, let's go do work. But and that long ass story I just told is back to what you were saying about the fire chief. There was a movement, and it'll be easily documented in books coming out in the future and stuff. There was that movement, and still some cities are doing it. They're trying to check these boxes, these demographics and stuff. It just has never worked that way. And so what ends up happening really is it backfires. Totally. And you put a person in a position based on some certain category, and then they fail. Yeah. It looks horrible. It looks horrible for the department. But what's worse is when you're doing it with jobs where people could be, you know, their lives are on the line. It will show that there was a lack of leadership, but that was what was starting to happen, was that breakdown in promoting actual leaders, people who you could do that, or the person that gets on the scene and there's complete chaos, you know, a person's arms ripped off, someone screaming, that person cut him with a machete, you know, and you're trying to get people in custody and just control the scene. And there's always that term of big Sarge, you know, big Sarge gets on the scene. And if it's not under control, you know, they help get it under control. Yeah. And that sergeant gets promoted to lieutenant, captain up the line. And that is what leadership's about. I've never understood the whole category thing. I never, and it was even going back to my Army days. Nobody in the Army ever talked about race or demographics or anything. It was like, can you do the job? Yes. Do you have leadership ability? When you're given the task to actually be like an ad hoc leader, do the soldiers follow you? Okay, cool. This is what, you know, start training up, go to the promotion board, make sergeant, be a team leader, whatever. Yeah. I don't know, that it is the recipe for success, and everybody can be successful that way. I mean, in the acting field, that would be like, I guess, hiring a director. Well, and they've never done director, they don't have this vision, or I don't know.
And that happens, and it has happened. And we certainly had that moment as well, right? So it's different in your field because people's lives are at stake. They're at risk, and, you know, real life bad things happen. Hollywood, of course, followed suit, did all the same things, checked all the boxes. But at the end of the day, you just have a bad movie. or a bad TV show. People aren't dying. It's like, oh, like for example, like, well, whatever. There's a reboot of the franchise 24. I love 24. A lot of people did. Like they just got it right. Kiefer and everybody, like awesome. Well, they decided to bring it back because hey, we need new stuff. Oh, okay, but we're gonna check all these boxes and call it 24 Legacy. And so we did one season. But here I was coming right off, fresh off Longmire. Feeling really great about everything. And I sort of get hired into this, what was sort of the Kiefer role. There was like a younger protege who is the lead of the show, Corey Hawkins. He's awesome. And I was, the mentor. Well, they're trying to check all these boxes and give all of these people opportunities that maybe weren't qualified to be in those positions. And the leadership just wasn't strong enough. And so we premiered to 17, 18 million viewers after the Super Bowl. And we're down at like 3 million by the season finale, thrown in the trash.
Okay.
And you probably never heard of 24 Legacy, but for that one season, it was a big thing and the ads were everywhere. And we got that prime slot right after the Super Bowl, because we got that audience, and then it just nosedived. And so, man, without good leadership, you kind of got nothing. And so conversely, with the right leadership, like the Taylor Sure and stuff, like that's top shelf. Longmire was great. Homestead is great. And it goes from the top all the way down. And fortunately, we're not checking boxes. We're not making this for Hollywood standards. We're making it for the people, the real people.
And I think that comes through. That's the thing too. And for people who are like, no, you got to have Hollywood, whatever. I'm always for like the dark horse, the underdog who is like, I'm gonna either they're gonna write a novel they love, or they're gonna create a show, or they're gonna act in a show, whatever. They're gonna write a script. But like for some people, if money is what matters to them about success in the entertainment world, I think Angel Studios is killing it. If I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not trying to do shameless
some numbers, and I'm like,
it's I'm very happy to be working there. They're great. Like they showed up on the set of Homestead, and they're all in like hiking boots and hoodies and puffer jackets, and back in LA, the executives show up in suits and everybody like gets quiet. These guys show up to set and it was a big party. I was like, we're talking about going snowboarding and stuff. And they're all like really successful guys, but family guys, faith is very important to them. This is a product that I'm excited, not just about making, but putting something positive out into the world that my kids can see. And I'm proud of.
Yeah. I think too, the message of like, do we seal off the homestead? Do we allow to help people? Do we establish a world, where we do help people? I mean, that is true. And you can obviously add that, for
we all
for other things. What's that?
We all have that inner struggle, that conflict of, do we do the safe thing and protect, or do we do the big risky thing? And I don't want to spoil it.
Don't. But that's the thing. I love anything like that where people are excited about doing it. Their heart is behind it. The same way in the music world. Like I still listen to the same bands that I did when I was a kid, and of course I listen to new music too. But it's just that idea of if people care about it and they create it, it lasts. And it happens to make money. And why does it make money? Because it rings true. Yeah. That's the way I look at it. I could be wrong. I know I'm not, because I'm being serious. Like I know I'm not. I think anything in the art world, once it gets commercialized, and too many of those suits, like you're saying, that get their hands into it, and it does come down to a money thing, or the writing becomes stale, or,
I mean, it happens. It even happened to Yellowstone, so
maybe I'll find out one day.
Maybe.
I don't know.
You're funny.
Look, have you got any other projects you've got
So
going on?
yeah, thanks for
besides
asking.
HOMESTEAD?
There's a I call it a little film with a big heart that's out in select theaters right now. It's called Sod and Stubble. Back when Kansas was the Western frontier in the 1880s. You know, it's sad. Life was hard back then, but it's about staking your claim and the American dream. So I'm proud of that one. That was my first time being a producer, so that was cool to put that hat on and do that. And I really enjoyed the responsibility. And that was a set where I was looking around. It's like, yeah, okay, but everybody's coming to me with the questions, and but it was cool. I'm happy to lead if asked. I'm not gonna ask for it, but if people put me in that position, then let's go. And then I got another Western coming out called Florida Wild. It was always a dream of mine to work in my home state. And yeah, this guy, Mark Pentecost, built a little Wild West town on his ranch down there in Mayaca City. And it's very close to the Everglades. And back in the day, they used to do cattle drives through the Everglades and put them down on the train and ship them north. So I'm excited to see that. And then I'm going back to Utah tomorrow to pick up Homestead where we left off. And that's streaming angel.com, Angel Studios app, however you want to watch it.
Perfect. Well, if people want to reach out to you, can they, or are you like, no, I don't have time. I got.
No, I don't do social media. I'm I
don't blame you, man.
No, like every other actor, I do. It's daily chase. I'm mostly Instagram. I do some Facebook. A little bit of, it all filters, goes to threads. They all. But Instagram's the main one.
Okay, good deal, man.
But thank you. Next time I'm in Wilmington, I'll look you up and
do it, dude.
We'll get some beach time. And
oh yeah, well,
I love it. I got some good buddies down there. So
yeah, hit us up, man.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Hey, take care, man.
Okay. All right. Cheers.